is that those are some of the things for me as a parent faced with this, and I think I would hope that ODs would find parents to be receptive to that approach.
Yeah, I think a lot of parents or a lot of doctors have told us that they see parents like talking in the Facebook groups about myopia control and treatment and MiSight, and so they do their second opinion work wherever they like, but they do come back typically within a month, ready to move forward. It's kind of like the doctor can just say, don't take my word for it. And you say that a lot too, and find out on your own, but I'm going to support you in this education journey, and I'm here for you. Right? Yeah.
One of the topics that came up on an event that we were both at, the audience was polled on how they respond to parents who say not interested. So after you've gone through all this, you've explained it, you've educated them, but they say not interested. And one of the things that came out of that was a lot of the doctors would say, that's okay, we'll just have you come back in 6 months, where it might be, we might want to rethink that and do a follow-up, give them that opportunity if they need that to talk to a spouse, think it over, do some research, but then touch base with them perhaps in a couple weeks. That could be by Zoom, maybe you email them, have them when they come back to pick up their glasses. Because as Justin said, what we talked about, 6 months is sometimes, then it becomes out of sight, out of mind. We're not thinking about it anymore.
Yeah, truly. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mr. Brown, have you given more thought to what we talked about last time? Glad you're back in for the glasses or even the contacts, perhaps. And then, again, if it's still an objection, then we'll see you in 6 months, or and then you have to keep coming back to it, though, right? I'm sure they chart and they keep the notes, but hey, Mr. Brown, we chatted a year ago, and this is the situation. So, got a lot more science now behind it. This is working really well. Let's give it a go, and by then you might. And I think persistence is required here too, right? Yeah. Not just in the sale, but in staying in these products long term. Right. And I think that's what's so hard about this is there's a urgency to do something, but it's okay if that urgency happens a year or 18 months down the road. You still have done a great job as a doctor introducing it, bringing them along the journey, and making it happen. So it might be 1 or 2 diopters difference if they started sooner, but at least they're in it and having the success.
Yeah, a lot of successful doctors do pair up with their staff member and keep a very detailed log of who said yes, who said no, who said not yet. Yeah. And they do follow up and try to keep, make sure nobody falls through the cracks. Yeah. I think that is the pathway to success.
And the staff can help here too, right? Yeah. That's where the practice working as a team, when Mr. Brown comes back in or something, and say, hey, how's Joe doing? And what, playing soccer still, or have you given more thought to myopia? So if everybody's on the same page, that's where success comes too.
Yeah, it doesn't just have to be the first time they're hearing about it from the doctor. Yeah. It could have been the technician mentioned it. The conversation moves into the exam room. There's more people within the practice who probably should. If it's a part of your brand, then it probably should be talked about. So you mentioned something before, the successful doctors and what they do, and I love creating that list. So let's pick on doctors for a second.
Okay.
What are the unsuccessful ones doing wrong?
I think the less successful ones are more reactive than proactive. Like the mom or dad really has to be like, can't we do something about this? But if they're like, okay, let's go to optical and update the glasses, then the doctor would be like, oh, not reacting to, or not being proactive to bring up the treatment, which is the solution. Like you said, it's the great news. And they may not have created that contrast of like, I have good news and bad news, right? The bad news is your child's continuing to get worse, but the great news is we finally have a treatment that can keep this from getting worse so quickly. So yeah, I think the other successful doctors are just, maybe they do give up after hearing 2 no's, or they're just like inconsistent day in and day out of like educating the families. But maybe we all just need an accountability partner, somebody to keep us, fighting the good fight and staying the course, and reminding like, maybe in the weekly huddle, like these are the success stories. Oh, but here's an adult that did lose their best corrected vision. So again, I think creating the good stories and bad stories remind us of why we're on this mission.
Yeah. You've heard me talk enough times that, I like introducing stories. I'm always looking at ways to simplify patient education. Yeah. I think perhaps that's one of the things that doctors might be guilty of, is having what you call the curse of knowledge, right?
Too much data.
Yeah. We understand something so well that we forget what it's like not to understand understand all that. And the data backs that up, and the number of people who leave their doctor confused about what they were just told.
Yeah.
And, not that we're salespeople, but I like to pull things sometimes from the world of sales. That term, confused people don't buy anything, right? If we're not clear on what something is. So keeping the message somewhat simple, it's very easy to go deep into the weeds on myopia management. And you're right, it is new, it's novel, and I think that's important, but also contrasting that with it's not difficult. They're just contact lenses like you've had before, taking them in and out, and not making it sound overly complicated to be able to do even for a younger kid.
Dave, do you think patients with presbyopia, do they walk out of offices because they're confused about distance with reading glasses, monovision, and multifocals? Do you think doctors have accidentally explained all three with too much detail? I think that happens to a certain extent.
Look, I think anytime you're interacting in a space every 12 to 18 months, to your point, you forget about stuff, right? So I think that any conversation with a patient has to sort of be as simple as you can make it, right?
Yeah.
And then have an outcome and have an answer. But I think the materials that can be left behind are important. I think if someone Googles MiSight, I know there's great materials and there's some great information on there.
Yeah.
So I think that ultimately it's about coming across as the doctor providing great advice for you as a patient to improve your life, right? And to improve, so be it computer vision, be it the blue light, be it progressives, be it whatever. But I do think the fact that there is a long time in between visits can sort of play into what makes this, because it's as weird as it is, eyes don't seem to be top of mind for people, right? The way we kind of would wish they were the industry we're in. So,
really wish,
so that's kind of how I think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think going back to the journey about the staff again is that some doctors are even moving that education so much forward is that when you pick up the phone, is this appointment for glasses, contact lenses, or myopia control? Or when you schedule online, that is one of the rectangle buttons you can click on is a myopia control consultation. But I think what we're really encouraging these days is that educational material by the autorefractor, so the pre-tester can give that to the parents even before the doctor ever enters the exam room. And that does a couple things, like whether the parent actually flips it open and looks at it, it actually gets the doctor to realize that mom or dad is holding something. Oh, that something is related to my sight. I better talk about it. So I think keeps the doctor, again, accountable in a kind of front-loaded way.
There's an element to, we talk a lot about this again at IDOC, about differentiating your practice and having a specialty, which sort of goes back to the why, right?
Yeah.
But if you make all of that sort of endemic into the practice, right?
Yeah.
So in
Second
theory,
nature.
well, look, we do this test with all kids.
Yeah.
We do this with all children who we see. And then it becomes second nature. Well, that's what we do, right? And 6 months later, well, it's the child, we're going to do this. And then word of mouth is so important. You talked a little bit about that, the second opinion or even the third opinion.
Yeah.
So the word of mouth here, I think, can be so powerful because I saw Dr. Vargo and it was amazing what he did with Jane, did this and that. I've never seen that before. And then, maybe I should take my Susie to Dr. Vargo. And so that word of mouth, and that's where I think, even if you only do one patient a month to start, you're going to get more patients because of what you're doing as a doctor, because you're doing it as an independent optometrist that not a lot of other folks are doing. And it just sets you up differently as a practice.
Yeah, it just about, that word of mouth can happen so quickly. Like we heard a story in California where that word of mouth happened in weeks. Like 2 patients were treated this week. This one told their sibling, this one told a friend. And by next week, they haven't seen the 6-month results yet.
Amazing,
but that word of mouth happens so quickly.
Yeah.
I would think that's a huge snowball effect.
Yeah.
And it may be a good reason to stay consistent.
Yes.
It's probably going to be slow. A lot of times it is slower in the beginning to get the message out there, to refine your approach to it. how to communicate that to parents. But once you get that first patient in and that second, and hopefully they're going to want to tell other people. This isn't just like getting a new pair of glasses. This is different. This is the kind of thing. It's remarkable. It's the kind of thing that people want to share. I'm curious, and again, you could both your perspectives. We've talked a lot about the clinical side, but what about the business side of myopia management? Maybe I know we have a very good relationship with Cooper Vision, and what we've done there, what we're trying to do too, to expand on that, both to help the doctors and maybe indirectly help the patients as well. But if you could speak to that as well.
Yeah. From the professional fee standpoint, like I think we live in this like soft sphere contact lens eval fee, then torics and multifocal fees. And this is a really great way to increase the revenue we bring in from professional services without spending a lot of extra time. So whether it's revenue per patient or revenue per hour, myopia management will really increase, like it's a multiplier. It's literally like 5x in a lot of cases. And then you could still profit on the margin of the contact lens sale. This is your annual supply of treatment lenses. Whether you look at it as a 60% margin or maybe a $400 margin, that's really healthy. For a product, a treatment lens they use every day. Because if you're not using the lens, I always joke like, maybe the adults are using their Mighty multifocal for pickleball part-time. But the kids need to use their lens every day. And that's just a nice recurring revenue. And you're typically starting patients, these children, with MiSight at an earlier age than they would have gone into for single vision contact lenses. So I see gains on both the professional fees and the materials and the lifetime value of that patient.
Yeah, look, I think as Justin said, this from a practice perspective and what you're doing for the patient is tremendous. But there's also revenue potential. There's growth potential for the practice, not just in what you would get from MiSight, but just that word of mouth we talked about, or even more with the parents or something. But I know we've talked a little bit about this, Justin. But I think I've heard even 50 to 100,000 is pretty easy to do in terms of top line revenue, and that might be 3 to 4 patients a month or something. So again, you're not going to do that right out of the gate, but that can be. And I also think that would multiply because of other things that are happening. And with our partnership with Cooper Vision, they support us in so many ways, which we love, and we thank you for that. A lot of study group dinners, so I know this is starting to be a topic when we have our IDOC member directors have the members come together for the dinners, and that's very, very. You talk about word of mouth, right? So if Dr. Vargo is talking about what he's doing with MiSight, and the rest of the doctors, they all lean in to listen. So that's very, very powerful, and so that's just another way for doctors to learn about the business side of it, because again, you've made the clinical side very easy. You got a tremendous product, you got great materials. The training is not short and sweet. I don't want to say it that way, but you made it very manageable. And so then you sort of look at the doctor and say, this is all about persistence, but you can lean on IDOC peers to learn more. You can come to the connection to learn more. So the resources are out there to help people succeed.
It's a great time to jump in. And I think also knowing that, hey, if I don't have this conversation with these families this year, next year is going to feel a little bit more awkward, but I know the sooner the better, right? And it's like, again, back to staying consistent and knowing that the opportunity is tremendous, that we can grow our practice in this direction. And at those like doctor dinners, it's just like, oh, it's doable, it's achievable. And if they can have success, I can have it too.
You mentioned getting started training. For those doctors who have not gotten started, how do you get started? Like, they're just wondering, like, how do I get this thing off the ground?
For sure. 2 things. I don't even think a parent-doctor agreement is necessarily required because it's an FDA-approved on-label for slowing the progression. But some practices like the 2-page where the parent signs off, the doctor signs off. We have templates for that. You can just customize it, put your logo on it. So that's one. The second one is just really set your fees. Set your fees for the services and for the materials, and those are really the 2 things that get you started. Now, you don't need to go through certification anymore. We have a 15-minute refresher video on our online success center. But really just reaching out to your Cooper Vision rep, or we, as I mentioned, have 25 myopia reps throughout the country. They'll get you your one tray MiSight Fit set. Those educational materials are free. Everything's free. That we can get those right by the autorefractor. And that's essentially the first few pieces you need. You don't need anything fancy. Yeah.
I love what you said earlier too. Maybe your own child has this issue, or maybe it's as simple as a doctor, take a half hour and think about the patients you've seen in the last 6 months. I guarantee there's going to be 5 to 10.
Yeah.
That child I should have talked about, or I wish I had talked about myopia management. And then it's taking the first step.
Yeah.
I think back to your kids taking piano lessons. You got to sit down that first time and miss all the notes, right? Because you're not playing Bach or Tchaikovsky right out of the gate. Yeah. So, but then once you get a little bit better at it, then you might sit down at the piano more, right? And so that's how. But you just have to get started. And I think Cooper's made it really easy. And IDOC has a new program, which is great. So it's included in the rebates you get from IDOC and so on. So we've made it easy as well. And now it's up to the doctor just to say, this is something I really want to do. And I love what you said. It's starting to have that momentum to, it's almost like, why am I not doing this? Not that I maybe I should do this. It's, geez, I really shouldn't be doing this.
I would think, too, the more you treat it, the more confident you get as a doctor, because I think you have to have that, and that's got to transfer over to the parents, because if you show any signs of reluctance, it's going to be hard for the parents to get on board if they have some anxiety. So I think once you see that second, that third, that fourth patient that you've had success with, now you almost feel a sense of you really want to help a kid out. And when you see a kid would benefit, it's no longer just a check. I had the conversation, check, come back in 6 months. You're really able to sit down and I would think be much more confident with that conversation, and hopefully be able to take that parent and make them more comfortable as well.
And then the parent begins to feel that you as a doctor really care about this. I think one OD told me myopia should be an unacceptable diagnosis. And if the parent doesn't feel that, I think we have some room for improvement. Right? No big deal, but it actually is a big deal for these kids. I think sometimes doctors also can be like, well, I saw a few kids after school today and, they had a great exam, or some are doing well in myopia. But for that one child, it was a big day to get contact lenses in and out of their eye. And like you said, now their childhood or their middle school years are forever changed and headed in the right direction, hopefully.
Well, I think the expectation, you should tell me this, but it shouldn't be, I'm going to bat 1,000. I know you got baseball players in your family, right? You're not going to bat 1,000. You're going to have parents who say, not today. You're going to have kids who maybe just don't take the contact lenses. But it's the same thing. If you don't try it at all, then you're not anywhere either, right? So I think being able to understand that there are going to be success stories and some that don't work, maybe not yet.
Yeah. And even our doctors that have treated 300 kids already, they tell me just last week on Wednesday, 5 parents told me no. But then Thursday, 4 parents said yes. And they're really good at educating parents. That's how they got their 300 kids treated. And there's sometimes still no rhyme or reason why some families are not taking to what we prescribe.
But that's not unusual when you say you should be in daily disposables. No, I like my monthly lenses, right? So ODs are used to it. I think there's a dynamic with the child and the parent that might make this a little bit more charged.
Well,
I agree.
By nature, I think we're also guilty at times of not being more adamant about the things that we think they need. We get caught up in our own cycle of worrying about whether or not they can afford it, and it's not covered by their insurance. And as well as I do, we've probably done it as well. We hesitate to have those conversations with parents making the decision for them, which isn't right. Let them make the decision. But I do think there's this incredible gray area of opportunity in between, right? You've got on one end, the people that are coming to you and saying, Dr. Kwan, I want to be fit myopia management. Tell me more about it. it. You got the people at the other end you're never going to convince. But I do think there's a lot of room in that middle where if we figure out how to communicate it better, educate better, understand, connect emotionally, those sorts of things, I think we have a lot more influence in that area. So then it's no longer one a month. Then it becomes 2 a month and then 3 a month, and we're on a roll. But one thing I always encourage doctors to do this, go find other doctors who are successful and talk to them. If they'll take you in for half a day and you just be as quiet as a mouse in the corner and just say, I'm here to observe. Let's go to lunch afterwards. Lunch is on me. Let me pick your brain. As long as it's outside of your competitive area, I think you're golden, because I found that within our profession, I think people that are successful love to tell other people why they're successful.
Yeah. On the mysight.com website, there is a doctor locator, and with all the direct-to-consumer efforts we've done over the past 4 years, about a few hundred parents are looking for a MiSight doctor each and every day. And not all of them are getting treated, because our numbers don't show that. So we know at least they're taking the extra time to click and find a doctor. But what happens between that click and do they show up? Were they educated properly, and those sorts of things? So I think the demand is that groundswell we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and you talked about the why before, and I see a lot of that within this specialty. The demand is certainly there. I know that we'd like to close the gap in terms of the demand and the number of patients we're treating, but you and I have been at a lot of the same events. I've spoke at some of the events that Cooper has had. There's just a different energy in the room when it's doctors who are excited about myopia management, and they're there not because they have to be. They really want to learn more about this. So I think that's speaks very positively to the future of myopia management, seeing that there's that energy there's that drive to continue moving it forward. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, the International Myopia Institute is a great example. They're a global organization that essentially read 1,000 scientific papers a year. And the rate at which they're publishing is twice as fast as the TFOS, the Tear Film Ocular Society, which is also a phenomenal organization. But I see, like, it is drinking from a fire hose. There's just so much study and interest, and like, we need to take care of this across every country, every region. That is something that no doubt we need to get behind, because that's where the science is headed. And every day we know for sure this is the right thing to do, and how we do that can incrementally get better.
Yeah, I think the time is perfect to jump on this, kind of, as you guys are saying. I mean, when we look at IDOC, we're up to almost 25% of our locations now are using, and I think the growth was like 30% last year when you aggregate. That's strong growth, but I actually think that's going to double in the next year or two, because we're going to do things like the connection. We're going to do things like the study group meetings, the podcast that you do, right? And I know you've had Justin on before. And so I feel the momentum, but this has been, I mean, I give Cooper all the credit in the world. I don't know when you started the studies, a good 10 years ago now? Or?
Yeah, we started recruiting in 2012.
Yeah. So then, you had the foresight to sort of say, this is something, and then you did the hard work, and now you have the product, and now it's sort of that last mile to get the ODs. And now I think the testimonials, the data, the materials, you guys being out talking about as much as you are, I'm really bullish about where this is going, because I think it's just the perfect sweet spot of it's contact lenses, it's kids. You can change lives forever putting someone into this, and I think it's something that a practice can add pretty. I don't want to say easily, because nothing's easy, but you've made it easy for them.
Yeah, and one of your IDOC members, Dr. Sabrina Gann, was telling me that she had a family drive an hour to see her, because that family called a couple of offices and they either didn't have MiSight, or the staff didn't know what myopia control was. And so Dr. Sabrina wasn't even selfish. She's like, I would have loved that family didn't need to drive an hour to see me, and somebody could have taken care of them out there. But yeah, I think that's, again, back to the tipping point, is that we need every community to start doing this. And optometry is just so well distributed across zip codes and geographies that there should be a home practice for all kids to get care. Yeah.
It's been a great conversation. I mean, I've learned a lot of things. I mean, I know how important this is, but just some of the insights and the nuances, I think we've hopefully opened some eyes, to use a terrible pun, of some doctors and who might be interested in bringing this on board. And I know all the support is there from Cooper, which we greatly appreciate. And Steve, all that you do out talking to doctors and everything else. I'm really excited for the next year, and I really see IDOC getting behind this even more, because our members, they love this stuff. They love to sort of be at the cutting edge, to be at the forefront, to be trendsetters. And I think those who are involved now, and those who aren't are going to look back in 3 or 4 years and say, why am I not doing this? I think we're getting to that point.
We are. And at the end of the day, it's like worth it for the patients, for the practice, everybody involved. And I always like to say the smiles of the kids, they never get old.